I'm live. Hey guys, it's me. It's Alejandro. I know a lot of you are in the other room, and I'm going to try to get you over here right now. I had a lot of problems, and I'm going to explain to you the deal in just a second here. As soon as I get over, I want to invite the other peeps. Yo, peeps over here. Because one of the problems was, I have it set up for my house, but my normal setup. And as you can see, I'm not in my normal setup. I'm somewhere else, and I'm wearing a jacket and I'm wearing a shirt. And why is that? Well, I'm about to tell you momentarily, as soon as I get all these other people over here, because they were bummed. They were like, oh man, come on. And I don't blame them. But it's also really hard. They've changed everything in YouTube. And so, like right now, I'm trying to get over to the other one that I was just in, and it won't let me. Well, there's a few people. Hey, Johnny. Hey, Mary. Okay, we're going to talk some UFOs in just a second. But let me see if I can get people over here. No, it won't let me. Very frustrating, as my good friend Nick Pope would say. Very frustrating, isn't it? All right. So we're just going to have to hope that people get over here. So I don't know. Is there a way to share screens on this? Okay. So Tim, he made it over here. So I'm on in a jacket and at my actual house, but I'm not at my desk where I do this normally because, and here's a little secret for you guys, I was working on something for a TV show, and that went long, so I wasn't able to get back to my house to do the regular stream. So I'm so sorry. But since I'm here, I'll be able to answer some questions and we'll go over some news. So that'll be a lot of fun. Of course, one of the big things going on, and let me introduce myself. My name's Alejandro Rojas. If you're new to this isn't normally how my stream goes. Normally, I have a cool background and some lights and stuff like that. But sometimes I kind of got to do it guerrilla style like this. And that's just fine, huh? And but I've been writing about this topic for many, many years. I'm a journalist, and I write about space and everything. And I get to interview astronauts and people who do that kind of thing. In fact, I've got some cool interviews coming up very soon from the people who make the History Channel. And I think I told you guys this before, J. Allen Hynek's son. So J. Allen Hynek's son is J. Allen Hynek was a guy who helped the Air Force investigate UFOs. He was an astronomer, and he kind of pretty much started the whole UFO thing. He, at least civilian UFO research, he entered the program thinking it was all BS, but the more he saw it was the real deal. And so when the Air Force canceled their Project Blue Book, their last official, at least as we know at the time, UFO research program, then he started up his own civilian organization. So now the History Channel has this television show coming out in January where they are featuring J. Allen Hynek as the main character, and they're talking about some of these real UFO investigations. And I was recently at AlienCon, and I was doing a talk, and I got to meet Paul Hynek, his son, and that was really cool because he came up after one of my talks and thanked me for saying nice things about his dad, which of course it was my pleasure because I'm a big fan of his father. And so it was a lot of fun. Hey, everybody. Hi, Ian. Hi, Paps. And you know what? I wish, and if one of you guys knows this, I thought you could share your screen, but it doesn't look like you can do that on here. So you know what? I'll just have to get creative here. So that is, so Paul Hynek I will have on the show, and also the director for this Project Blue Book TV show. Now, I got to see the first couple episodes, and it was pretty good. Ooh, somebody talking about something. Brian, hey Brian, I'll talk about what you're talking about real soon here. But I got to see the first couple episodes of Project Blue Book, and I invited you all to come, and many of you did, actually. We had a packed house, and it was really good, I thought. Now, some of you are probably familiar with Bryce Zabel, especially those of you who have listened to my podcast, because I've had Bryce on quite a few times. Bryce created this television show called Dark Skies. And it was during the time that X-Files was huge, and it essentially was kind of the UFO mythology. So the whole idea of what people think is behind the whole UFO thing and aliens and all of this kind of thing. And so it was really interesting. And it ran for just one season, unfortunately. But Bryce Zabel was the guy who created this show. And interestingly enough, Project Blue Book has a very Dark Skies feel. In fact, I emailed Bryce and I said, hey, have you seen Project Blue Book? And he said, no, why does it remind you of Dark Skies? Which is kind of funny because I said, yeah, exactly. That's why I'm contacting you. And so he wanted to hear more about it. So we'll have him on at some point after he sees the show too. But yeah, so we'll have a lot of creators for the show on my podcast in the next couple of weeks. Now, if you don't do podcasts and you only do YouTube, of course, I post my podcast here on YouTube so you can hear it. But I'll also tell you all about it here on the UFO live shows. And maybe I'll try to get a little bit of video for you guys, see if I can do that. So, wait, somebody said, I work on Blue Book, Truck with Transmitter episode. Did you see J.A. Hynek on Close Encounters of the Third Kind? So, the person who just said that in the chat, are you saying that you worked on the television show Project Blue Book, like you were an extra or something? Let us know. That's really cool if you were. Somebody else said, I saw the new Bob Lazar film last night, and it was amazing. I thought that hand-bone security thing was some amazing confirmation. Hand-bone security thing. I'm not sure what you mean, but I think what you mean is when they raided his place. I don't know. Oh, you were a grip on the show. Cool. That's awesome. Well, welcome. That's so cool. But the Bob Lazar show. So the Bob Lazar was the guy who essentially made Area 51 famous. In 1989, he came out to KLAS television show, TV channel news, and said, you know, he worked at this secret base that is just south of Area 51. They would fly him throughout Area 51 and bus him to this underground base called S4. And that there he worked on technology that was beyond ours, trying to back engineer it. He in particular worked on the propulsion, and that's his story. And so was he telling the truth or not? Well, it's hard to say. Normally, I would not think that it was a big deal personally. I would think that this is just some other guy with some wild claims. And sure enough, his education is not able to be confirmed. But there's a great investigative reporter in Las Vegas who took what he said seriously and did some investigating and found that he could be telling the truth. And now this gentleman's name is George Knapp, by the way, who I've interviewed and had on the show. Now George Knapp believes he is telling the truth. He feels that he's talked to enough insiders that he's telling the truth. I don't know personally. Now, I've seen this new documentary. My good friend, Jeremy Corbell, who has been on the podcast a few times, came out with a new movie called Bob Lazar. I almost said Blazar. It is a Blazar story. Maya says he is telling the truth. Well, the problem is at least with his education, there's many reasons to doubt whether or not, or to doubt his claims as far as his degrees. And that's the hard part. There's also some problems with the science. So I'm definitely going to be talking to Jeremy some more about this and doing some debating. We've done this in the past, and I'll show some more debates that we could talk about some of the facts. But I must say, this new documentary is very compelling. So a couple people talked about him being raided. and that the government, or at least the FBI, came in and they did raid his place. But they were, what they claimed is that they were looking for potentially radioactive material that he was selling to someone he wasn't supposed to sell it to. And in his business, which is called what? United, somebody can remind me. United Scientific, or I can't remember the full name right now. I'm sure one of you will remember. But United Nuclear. Oh, someone will remind me. But the point is that this company that he runs is a scientific company where they provide United Nuclear. So I was right. They provide science materials, essentially everything from chemistry sets to, the materials so you can build, let's say, a volcano like you do in elementary school, all the way to nuclear material. And this material, legally, there's a lot of gray area in what you can sell to who and how. And so it's not too surprising that he got raided or had a problem that way. But it is kind of strange in that they raided his place, and they weren't looking for just receipts or something, which he could have shown them. They were looking for something else, and they allegedly weren't telling him. He believes, or at least I'm going to confirm this with Jeremy Corbell when we have him on the show, because he actually wouldn't talk about it. Jeremy said, well, you've got to talk about this. And he said, no, I'm not going to talk about it. So it's very mysterious. It kind of alludes to that they think that Lazar was hiding some element 115. He claims to have had some element 115. But the problem is, at least with any scientist I've talked to in my own research, that's not possible. Element 115 is it has a half-life of just like a few seconds. And what that means is if you create it, it dissolves. It just disappears. It can't stay in a solid state, essentially, for a long period of time. Some people argue, well, there are different types of element 115, which is true. There's different isotopes, they call it. And but even those cannot last very long. So that's kind of the problem, is that at least as far as the science we know, someone corrected me and said decays is the word. But as long as the science that we know, that's not possible. You can't be carrying around element 115 or have it. Of course, can the aliens do it somehow? Maybe. I don't know. And some people have kind of misquoted things a bit. Like, for instance, they say, well, Bob Lazar was the first one to talk about element 115, and now we have it. So that proves that he knew before anybody else. Not true. The elemental, scale that we have has elements 1 through whatever. It used to be much smaller than it is now. So of course it's going to get up to 115 and beyond. Not only that, this whole discussion about stale or stable elements that are higher on the table has been something that has been discussed. In fact, they have been looking for what they call the island of stability. And they've always assumed 115 was not on that island of stability because it decays too fast. So only a few seconds, but they think that maybe there are some elements that are higher up, like even 116, 117, or there's a island, so maybe like 117 through 119 or something like that, where it is stable. And then these elements would have a lot of energy in them, and we'd be able to use them potentially for like creating electricity or energy or something like that. So it's not on the island of stability. It's near it. And so it's something that we've talked about. Yeah, someone said the periodic table. I'm a little bit out of it right now. Someone says, I think you need a collider to make one. And someone says it's not possible because they haven't found the right combination of stable neutrons. But, a lot of scientists say it's just not possible with 115. But of course, we don't know for sure. So At least Jeremy says he's talked to some scientists who say it is possible to have a stable element 115. I have not. So I would be interesting to hear whether or not that's true. Uh, Someone just put a quote in here, the same gentleman who worked on the Project Blue Book show, that a range of isotopes in and around 115 could yield a stable 115 with properties like what Bob described, or at least that's what Bob had said. But again, it's what Bob had said. And that's one of the other hard parts about this case is that this is all just one man making all of these claims, and no one has backed up what he's had to say for the most part. Now, I will say this new film that Jeremy has some other witnesses, but kind of not witnesses to these alleged spacecraft, not witnesses to, that this S4 underground base exists with these spacecraft. It has been alluded to before. Well, we do know S4 exists. However, they have admitted there's a lab called S4 in the Area 51 area, but it is not in the place that Bob Lazar said. It's somewhere completely different on the other side. So I don't know. It's really hard. For instance, if you look at the maps where he said S4 was and he was bused there, there's no roads busing anybody there. There's no roads. We have the satellite imagery now. Of course, back in '89 when he made these claims, we didn't have satellite imagery of Area 51 in the area. So it is really hard to know what's going on with this case. I think it's really interesting. Now, I've got a video out there where we do know of a disinformation, I guess, event where a gentleman who worked for the Air Force was putting out disinformation. This is well documented, but not well known. So I've got a video out there about this, and I refer to it often. It's about this gentleman called Richard Doty. If you just Google disinformation, you'll see it on our YouTube channel here. But I also did a video where I compared Bob Lazar to this guy. Now, I'm not saying Lazar is disinformation, but you know what? To be honest, I almost feel at this point that perhaps it almost I think it almost would make more sense that if Bob, we've got kind of three scenarios, maybe more, but the three main scenarios would be Bob Lazar is telling the truth and everything he's experienced really happened. The other would be that he's lying and he's making this up and none of that happened. But there's an in between, which would be that he's lying, or he was given information that was not accurate in order to disinform the public. That could be possible, and I almost think that is more likely than him lying completely. One of the reasons being he has passed polygraph tests, and so it seems that he definitely believes what he's saying. Another, I think, really, and I know I'm going back and forth because this is how I am on this. I'm on the fence. I don't know. Is that Lazar did tell some friends to be out in the desert at a certain period of time in the middle of the night, and that they would see some testing of a weird craft. And sure enough, they have. You can go out and see this video on YouTube where you have kind of this light in the sky. And then you have another light that's kind of going wing, 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 all around it. And people argue, well, how could he have known that they would be testing? How did he know that thing would be there? That is an excellent question. I don't know how he could have known that. So that video, the polygraph tests, and certainly to me, because he's a mentor and I highly respect him, George Knapp's opinions are really what keep this case in my gray basket, and now this film that Jeremy's put out is also really compelling. Although I think I still want to kind of debate Jeremy a little bit over some of the points, because some of them are I want to know, if he feels that there are certain aspects of this more than what I've mentioned that are confirmed, I want to know why and how. Um, so that would be really interesting. Um, Alien super technology means freedom. It could mean death. I think that people are a little, I don't agree with that. Alien technology, super technology means freedom for all. Because uh, the technology for instance, he describes, I mean, sure, you could take maybe a piece of element 115 and run, the electricity for the entire country uh, forever or something. But these technologies you can also use, just like with nuclear technology, you can use it to create huge explosions, and we could destroy ourselves. So, I mean, I think that it makes complete sense that until we understood it, we wouldn't want this technology in the hands of our enemies or unresponsible people who might do damage to us. So, I think everything's more nuanced and complicated than we may think. So, uh, are we responsible enough to have this technology? And I think the other thing is we always kind of bash the government. They don't tell us this and they don't tell us that, and this technology exists and they're hiding it from us. But if you believe that, if you believe aliens are here and they have this technology, they could share it with us as individuals as well. I mean, they could beam down right here and say, "Hello, Alejandro. We're joining you on your YouTube live to share this new technology with the world." I would love that. That would be great because I would get so many hits. But no, and then we'd be able to share technology. So we've got to remember there's a third party out there that if you believe there's a third party, if you believe aliens are here, that they are part of the cover up, that they are not sharing information either. So we have to remember that. I mean, and that's what makes all of this so complicated. First of all, there's so much speculation about what if this and what if that. So it's really, really hard. Mary just asked, maybe Bob Lazar has remote viewing abilities. Let's open a new can of worms there. I like that suggestion, though, not necessarily that he could be a remote viewer, although who knows. But you know why I like that, Mary, is that we don't know actually, because I proposed a few possibilities there. But in life and in science, when we don't know the answer to the question, typically when we find out that answer, it's something we never could have conceived of. It's something we didn't know. Even when we get in an argument, our spouse or a loved one says something that makes us really mad or does something that makes us really mad, we can't understand why they would do that. We make some assumptions, get in big fights, and then we find out the truth is they didn't even mean what we thought for reasons that we couldn't know. And that's why, discovery is so important and looking for answers. So I think it's great. Thinking out of the box like that, Mary, is really, really important. And who knows, you could be right. Let's see, there's someone else here. What part does Tom DeLonge's company play on this? And on our side or a government shill? I don't believe that personally To the Stars is working for the government in any means. And the reason I say that is that, first of all, I've known Tom DeLonge for a few years, and I work with him, when he got one of his first websites up, or we with Open Minds TV. In fact, a couple of our employees went to write for one of his websites, Jason McClellan and Maureen Ellsbury, for a period of time when they left Open Minds, and then he shut down that project. But he was just like us, just a guy looking for answers and interested in the topic, and wanting to do what he could do to get information out. And what he's accomplished is monumental. It's incredible. I think that in some of my stories, I've kind of made the argument that we might not have known about this government project investigating UFOs and the paranormal this ATIP project, which is also called OSAP, that was ran by Luis Elizondo and was revealed in the New York Times. If you don't know what I'm talking about here, definitely go to Open Minds TV and just look up Tom DeLonge, and I've got a long story. In fact, I've got a story on this in the Huffington Post, but I also have one on Open Minds. The one on Open Minds is called Tom DeLonge Strikes UFO Gold, because he found out so much information. But I also know some of the other people in the program, and they're the same. They're just people who have had a really strong, genuine interest in this. And I think that having followed this thing for so long, that these guys don't have any government inside information. They wish they did, but they're like the rest of us, trying to work with FOIA and trying to investigate and trying to discover more information as they can as civilians. In fact, they just talk with George Knapp a lot, the gentleman that I had just mentioned. Now, some of these guys, and this is another funny thing, out of Tom DeLonge's organization, they're really split on the Bob Lazar topic. Some of them believe it, and some of them do not. In fact, Eric Davis, a physicist that works with Tom's DeLonge group, is adamant that Lazar is completely full of it. Much of what he references as a physicist is a science. He's like, the science is completely wrong. This guy is full of it. He's been very open about his opinions. In fact, he shared on George Knapp's Facebook some strong opinions he has this way. So, yeah, so they are kind of torn, just like the general public, just like the rest of us on Lazar and other topics. So I think that they're just regular dudes looking for information, trying to get information out, but that I don't think they have as much information as I think that they have details that we may not have. Certainly, Luis Elizondo, who used to run this government program looking into UFOs, has more details, but they don't necessarily have more answers. They have perhaps more informed or educated speculation, but I think that that's kind of how I feel about that. Let's see. Some other people. Will you be making any future appearances? I guess my most recent future appearances are going to be on television or on networks, or at least productions on the internet. As far as public appearances, I don't think so, that I can think of. In September, of course, I'll be at the International UFO Congress. We're going to have a lot of great people there. But no, currently I don't have any talks scheduled now that I think about it. So we'll see. Thank you, though. Are people afraid to turn info into them? They need to be more inviting, I think. They seem to be a bit closed off. And I know you're talking about Tom DeLonge's group. And you know what? A lot of these guys are buddies, like I said. They're people that I've known for a while. However, I completely, 100% agree with you. And I have shared that opinion. I feel that one of their strong suits is not public relations. I don't think they come across as, warm and fuzzy, and and that you can have a comfortable back and forth with them. And I think that they should, because public outreach, I know, is important to these guys. But these guys are, administrators, professionals in business, and they're not the type. None of them have worked in marketing or public relations. And I think that's a problem, personally. I think that they need some people to help them on that side, because I agree with you 100%. They do feel closed off. They don't feel like it would be a back and forth. It feels more like, give us stuff and we'll tell you what it is and we'll tell you stuff about it, as opposed to, let's work together on this. And I think that the latter is important. Many of these people worked with Robert Bigelow in the past, who is a real estate mogul, billionaire. He started a space company called Bigelow Aerospace. He's trying to kind of be like SpaceX, just in that a civilian space program. He's working with NASA, and he did paranormal investigations, and his project was similar. It was a bunch of scientists who, without bedside manner, I guess, to put it in a way. And I think that was one of their problems is public relations. People who dealt with them didn't walk away necessarily with a warm, fuzzy feeling, even though I feel they are genuinely interested people, and I applaud their efforts. But I agree with you completely, Scarecrow. And you may notice that I'm using some of these methods now in how you deal with the public. So, for instance, agreeing with everybody. But I'm not doing that just to be disingenuous at all. I'm doing that because I think it's important. I think it's an important skill that we all need to practice is to look towards where we have similarities instead of getting upset about where we have differences. Even though I have a problem with that too. I get upset about those sort of things also. Um, let's see more questions. This is fun. Just talking, answering questions. After watching the movie about Bob Lazar, I wonder if he does in fact have the hidden piece of stable isotope 115, if the movie was correct. Now, I should probably be careful. We don't want to give too many spoilers, but I don't know that we necessarily are. But I think that's a great question. I think that is the outstanding question. And we'll talk with Jeremy more about that when we get a chance to interview him. But I think in a way that's what the film leaves you with. Is this really true? Does this exist? What would Lazar have to benefit from making this up? And why did they try to deny he worked at Dream Lake and then bits were proven he did work for them? Okay, so a couple things there, Patrick. First of all, he did not. We have no evidence that he worked at Area 51. However, what we did find is that he worked at, and I don't mean me, but actually George Knapp, is that he did work at Los Alamos in New Mexico. Los Alamos Labs is another top secret site where there are a lot of top secret projects going on. However, we don't know for sure what his role was at this facility. We have at least one gentleman who has said that he was in a meeting. He remembers Bob Lazar, and he remembers at least being in one meeting with him. And he was under the impression that Lazar was another technician. The meeting was for the technicians in there. And technician does not mean, in that setting, what it would mean elsewhere. So, for instance, a technician at Walgreens might be someone who's developing your photos or printing your photos for you. A technician at a location like Los Alamos is someone who probably has a master's degree, who is essentially a scientist. But we don't know for sure. We don't have if that's what he was doing. This person said that was his impression. So we don't know that he worked at Area 51. But we do know, and how the reason we know is his name was listed on a directory of employees for Los Alamos. But people have argued many people were on there, including janitors and such. So that doesn't necessarily prove that he was a scientist, but it proves that he did something at Los Alamos. So that is interesting, and that is a compelling piece of information. What would he have to benefit? I don't know. I think that's a great question. He really wouldn't have much to benefit. Unless for some reason he wanted to be famous, he wanted to have all this attention. He certainly has not taken advantage of it. He hasn't really, from what I know, attempted to make money off of it, large amounts of money, whereas some others who claim to have strange experiences certainly have sought to benefit financially from their notoriety, where we haven't seen that from Lazar. Another great point that has been made recently and is made in the film is, would he lie to his family? He may, if he was joking around, and this is actually something I've proposed, was he joking? He's a jokester. You can tell he's a jokester. Was he just pulling a fast one on his friends back there in in Las Vegas during the time. The argument to that is, well, maybe he would have done that to his friends. Maybe he was a jokester, but he wouldn't try to pull the wool over a lie to his family. And there is actually an interview with his mother in this documentary that I think you guys got to see. But here's the other problem with the question what he would get from it. I don't know, but many people have been caught in big lies, especially in this field, but elsewhere, and they don't have anything to gain, but they do make these lies, and I don't know why people do that. So, at least for myself, I try not to guess motivation. I try to look for the evidence because too many times I felt the same way in the past. Why would this person lie? There's no way this person would want to lie about something like this. And then it turns out they did lie about it. So I don't know. Let's see. I think that Lazar was put out there to rattle the USSR during the Cold War, making the Russians think the US had a UFO. I've heard that theory before. I can't remember where I've heard that theory, but that's an interesting theory. I think you may be onto something. And you know what's interesting? Ian is the one who proposed this. If that was the case, and if he was approached by some, government organization to do this, then he may have gone under oath not to ever disclose that he was a part of this. So he could be. Yeah, that's a possibility. I think that's interesting. Um, have you seen Joe Rogan's podcast with Tom? Sure seems like he can't sit still. I've seen a little bit of it. Tom DeLonge gets really excited about this topic and stuff, and I don't think he was coming from a strong position. I think, for instance, it would have possibly been wise. I think that he thought, I don't know. This is my guess. I think that he thought Joe Rogan was going to take it easier on him, or at least have more of a congenial conversation. I don't think he went into it like he was going to be in a heavy debate. Unlike he was on Larry King actually once, and he debated Michael Shermer, who is part of a skeptic organization, and there he did much better. So I think that, let's see. Guess we'll never know. Sorry, I'm gonna have to. Any chance of an open mind show reunion with Maureen and Jason? Probably not. Maybe Jason, because he's around more and I see him more. But see, everybody says this. This guy UFO shill, and I'm sorry, but that's you're splitting hairs. Somebody said he didn't claim to work at Area 51. He worked at S4. Okay, but he flew into Area 51. Area 51 is the headquarters there. Everybody knows Area 51. Area 51 encompasses essentially it's kind of a slang term for the area. So I don't think it's wrong. And everybody says, yeah, Bob Lazar in Area 51, and we wouldn't know about Area 51 if it wasn't for Bob Lazar. So sure, technically he was working in S4, but he flew through Area 51. It's related to Area 51. I know people, and I apologize, but people are always, he didn't work in Area 51, it's fine. They act like, but you know what? Not that big of a deal. That okay, he worked at a lab that was south of Area 51, but he had to fly into Area 51. Ooh, and on one of my videos, so the people who fly into Area 51 fly on these unmarked aircraft that fly out of McCarran Airport in Las Vegas. I've got some really cool pictures of these planes, and in one of my last videos where I actually went to a pre-screening of Jeremy Corbell's last movie, Hunt for the Skinwalker, I did a little video where I kind of gave you guys a pro tip where if you go to the top of the parking structure at McCarran and look out towards Luxor, right in front of Luxor, and you can see this in my pictures, is where you'll see those planes. So if you wanted to get your own pictures. Hi, Cartola. Yes, Mr. UFO guy. S4 is down the road from Area 51, but very close to it. I mean, it's right there if you go look at the maps. I like the Soviet disinformation idea. Somebody said. I think that's a good one too. That's a great suggestion. Let's see. I'm gonna have to go to the bottom. Oh, I saw an angry face. Let's see who's angry. No, 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 no. If Bob is lying, then how did he know? But how did he know what? There's nothing that Bob Lazar has revealed that wasn't known prior. Area 51 was even known. For instance, the general public didn't know about Area 51. It was an unacknowledged base, but KLAS, the organization that George Knapp works for, has actually, which is in Las Vegas, they've got stories going back to something like 1980, where they had been talking to engineers about Area 51. And you should look this up because it's really interesting. One of their first stories was with some engineers who had worked there. And essentially, they wrote this story. There's a super secret base out in the desert called Area 51, and the engineers had talked about how when this certain alarm goes off, they have to hit the ground and cover their eyes because an aircraft is coming by that they do not have the clearance to see. So they're supposed to lay down and cover their eyes and not look. Yeah, really interesting stories that came out pre Lazar on Area 51. Tom should have had Al Putov with him. That would have been a good idea. That would have been a really good idea. I mean, Tom is a really interesting guy and he's a neat guy. But when you talk to Tom, it's like talking to your buddy. Whereas it's not like talking to, let's say, a George Knapp or someone who's going to be really careful, or a Leslie Kane. I think she's a great example. Leslie Kane, if you're not aware, she is one of the authors of that New York Times article that I was referring to earlier that revealed this whole Pentagon UFO program. And she also wrote a book, UFOs, Generals and Officials Go on the Record. I never get the title completely right, but that's essentially it. New York Times best-selling book, great book, really credible stuff about UFOs. She, like Knapp, because they're journalists, and like I try to do, are more careful about what they say because in our business, you have to justify everything you have to say. You have to. Oh no! Now I feel bad. Okay, just a second. But you have to uh, source and justify everything you're saying. You have to show that what you're saying is credible. Sorry, UFO shill. He apologized. No big deal. You're clarifying. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel bad or anything. Or let's see. In a recent interview, George Knapp stated that he strongly believes Bob Lazar was used by the U.S. government as a means of testing the public's reaction to the alien presence subject. That is so terribly interesting. I think that is a great possibility. That is really interesting. Lazar knew about 115. He knew about the hand scanner before the tech was acknowledged. But again, Lazar lived in Los Angeles or Las Vegas. He had friends that were engineers. He certainly could have had a friend tell him about the hand scanners that they used because there is a video of these hand scanners that were used that shows that other facilities other than the alleged S4 facility that he worked at use that hand scanner. So that hand scanner again was something that many people knew about, even though it wasn't shared. So it's possible he could have known. I mean, I really would love to find a piece of information that we didn't have. How did he know about the test flights at Area 51? Now, that's a great one. I would agree with that. And I said that earlier. How did he know to tell his buddies to go out there at the particular time and that they would see the lights? Playing devil's advocate here. Look, somebody's going to call me fat, but that's not fair. It's this angle. But playing, this is what it is. When you get on YouTube and you do these things, people make fun of every little thing that you do or say or mannerisms, everything. So that's a great, that it could be that, he had gone out in the desert in the middle of the night because he lived in Las Vegas and he had seen them. So that's how he knew. Or someone had told him they go out in the desert in the middle of the night and they've seen them. That's a possibility. Just playing devil's advocate, that's a possibility. But I don't know. Are any of you aliens? That's a great question. I personally do not believe myself to be. And let's see, Tom seriously lacks the in-depth explanation that Joe was obviously looking for. So if Hal was with him, I'm sure Joe would have had a much easier time accepting the reality of what Tom was saying. I think that's right. Hal Puthoff, for some of you who are not aware, is another physicist that works with To the Stars and Tom DeLonge. And I think you're right. If he would have had a physicist, Joe Rogan would have had a much harder time really bashing what Tom DeLonge was saying. So are we saying that nobody who has ever had information privy to what Bob talks about have never come out? Yes. When it comes to element 115, when it comes to S4, when it comes to the alleged, spacecraft that he saw in these hangars, all of that, that's all specific to Bob Lazar. No one's come out and has confirmed any of that. None of it. Did anybody know about Area 51 prior to Lazar? I already asked that question. But yes, many people did know about Area 51. And like I said, there were news stories out about it. So, but yeah, that's the hard part about that. A lot of people are referring to Secure Team 10. I don't know why Bob Lazar went on Secure Team 10. Oh my gosh. And then with third phase of moon, it's not even third phase of the moon, it's third phase of moon. These guys are video fakers, so they're not really UFO researchers. So unfortunately, I personally do not recommend anybody watch or Secure Team 10 or third phase of moon because you're going to get a lot of fake stuff. I know Secure Team does get younger viewers, and it's really unfortunate because it's all just fakeness. 2 million followers. I know people love the fake goofy stuff. What can you do? Yeah, very frustrating. Now everybody's jumping on. It's so frustrating. It's so dumb. I know. I don't know why, but the world is like that. If you look at the fake stuff, gets way more popular than the serious research. But it's like that in pretty much everywhere, which is unfortunate, but just kind of the way it is, I suppose. But we didn't even get to any UFO news, but I don't think there has been much in the way of UFO news. There is this video out, and I'll show it here. Let's see if it will play here. But, okay, stop hating. Well, I'm not necessarily hating. It's just that when fakers are fake, then you got to let people know they're fake. I don't want you guys to waste your time on stuff that isn't real. Now, this is a video that came out recently from the Outer Banks. And that, I believe, is flares. I talked with Mark D'Antonio, who is the video analyst for the Mutual UFO Network. But I've seen this before, and I've seen this over the ocean before, because the Coast Guard and the Navy will use these. And of course, I live in Arizona, and out here, Goldwater Range to the south of us does this. And you can see these lights appear out of nowhere. And you're like, well, where's the aircraft? Well, you know what? When they're doing these exercises, and I've confirmed this, in fact, I've called the military and confirmed that with them firsthand, that the planes will have their lights off. So they're, and what they do is the pilots are using infrared, essentially night vision, so they can see each other. So, which makes sense. So they're flying dark. They're flying, and there's a term for it. Maybe that's it, flying dark. So you can't see them. So they're essentially invisible, flying around up there. And then they drop the flares, and that's why it seems like they come from nowhere. So I'm pretty sure those are flares. They don't do anything that flares would not do. And just so you're educated on this, and I have a video of this on the YouTube channel. You don't see smoke when it comes to flares all the time. In fact, many times. When they're far off, you're not going to see this. And the technology has gotten so, they're so incredibly bright that you can see them from a long, long distance. So you can see the light, but you can't see the smoke from the flares. You can probably go, I don't know how close you need to be, but yeah, it's really interesting. So I guess that's about it. I thank you all for being here. Yeah, I appreciate that. I understand, a lot of people. I don't like talking bad about people. I never do talk bad about people. But when some stuff is fake, when we can confirm something is fake or not real, then it's important for people to know that, because if you're really doing some research and looking for the good stuff, I think we need to keep paying attention to what's interesting out there. And that's why I personally feel Bob Lazar is a very interesting case that we should all pay attention to, or at least I like to pay attention to. So I'm excited about this new film. Hunt for the Skinwalker. If you haven't seen Jeremy Corbell's other film, I highly recommend that, and or reading the book. And then when it comes to the latest and greatest on all of this, you'll notice when it comes to all of these things I've talked about tonight, I've also mentioned George Knapp. And George Knapp is the investigator who investigated all of this material. And so George Knapp is a really important person to follow. I'm extremely excited because I live in Arizona here, and our local MUFON, who's ran by a great couple, Jim Mann and Stacy Wright, it's one of the best MUFON groups out there. They're bringing George Knapp. So George Knapp is going to be here in just a couple of days, and I'm going to be able to see him, ask him some questions, and hang out with him, because I'm a big fan, and it's always wonderful to see him. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining me. I hope I answered your questions. I hope that you all continue to think and continue to get involved in this. And I don't, when I share my opinions, I certainly do not want to profess and make it so that you believe what I believe. No, I want you to believe what you believe. And all I'm doing is sharing the information as best I can, sharing my opinions, but it's information for you to take to process. And I greatly respect every one of you for having your own opinion, even if your opinion is completely different than mine. Turkey UFO. Okay, UFO show keeps asking Turkey UFO, Turkey UFO. I used to believe the Turkey UFO. There's this video from, I think it's the early 2000s, and you can correct me, from Turkey. And it was a really good video, and I used to think that it was legit, but some researchers have recently been able to prove to me, I feel, that it's not legit. That it's I don't think it's a hoax or any fakery, but what they were able to show is that these bright, this particular camera, they put a big lens on it, and this lens and lens like it, when you are videotaping a bright point of light, reflect inside of the lens. And in the lens, you can actually videotape a reflection on the side of the lens. And they were able to demonstrate it. If you go out there and Google it, you can find it. But there are images that look just the same. And what you're seeing is, it's curved and there's a notch, because inside the lens, one of the rings there, that's the way it is. It's round with notches in it, and it looks just like that. So unfortunately, it appears that that's what that is. And I feel bad that but there are really good stuff out there. I mean, hey, I really believe that this is a genuine mystery, this whole UFO thing, and that there's more going on than is apparent to the eyes. So we may be visited. Who knows? You know what? But like Mary brought up, there could be other weird, out of the box answers to all of this strangeness. Like the weird out of the box answer to my strange expression right now, which is that I kind of have a headache and it's getting late and I still have lots of stuff to do. So thank you all so much. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to spend time with you. Adios, muchachos.